Hey, my name is Mark Ho, and I am a technical solution specialist here in the Vancouver office. And my co-presenter today is Sue Nieti Goldner. She is also a technical solution specialist out in the Toronto office. And we're both really excited today to bring you everything that is new and wonderful and exciting about the new release of Collector for ArcGIS. So if this is the first time that you've tuned into one of our webinars, thanks for joining us. Just as a reminder, when you joined in the meeting today, you were automatically connected to the audio broadcast, which will allow you to listen to the webinar on your computer. If you prefer to use your own phone, please click on the Request Phone button in the participant window and dial in using the instructions provided in the pop-up window. This information was also made available to you on your webinar invitation that you received via email. For the best view of the presentation today and all the demos we're going to show, you can maximize the screen with the full screen button. At any time, you can always return back to the original view with the return button on the top tab. If you have any questions about the content that we're presenting, please use the Q&A panel. Be sure to choose Ask All Panelists, type in your question in the box, and click Send. We'll also pause throughout the webinar to take your questions, and we'll also take a bunch of questions again at the end, but feel free to type in any questions you have at any point in the next hour. All right, we've got a power-packed webinar, so we have a lot to get through. First, we're going to take a look at what is new with the updated release of Collector for ArcGIS. Then we're going to spend some time setting up the layers in the web map that's going to be used to collect your data. And then finally, we're going to demo the app, the brand new app, so you can see how it works for yourself. But before we do any of this, I'm going to open a poll. And that poll is going to ask, have you used the Collector Field app? So have you used the original Collector, a classic version, or you have the chance to use the new version of Collector, or if you're just a newbie and just curious of what's going on. Just as an FYI, as you're filing in your answers, Collector is one of the most popular apps from taking all types of field collecting data. It was actually released 5 years ago and is long overdue for an update. So we had a long beta program with this new updated version of Collector, and there are a bunch of new features that we're going to highlight in the webinar today. So with that, let's take a look at the results. And I think we can see the results there. I'm not sure if you can or not. Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's share. And you should be able to see the poll results come up. So we have a bunch of you that have used the Collector Classic. A few of you had the opportunity to use the new Collector, and there's a bunch of you that are going to be using Collector hopefully in the next little bit. So with that, there's a bunch of new features that we're going to highlight about the new Collector. So I'm going to pass things over to Sue, who's going to run down some of these new features. Sue.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, everyone. We're going to go through a few slides first to chat about Collector, and then we're going to go right into our demos. As Mark said, we have a lot to show you today. So Collector is a complete refresh of our app. It's built on the latest version of ArcGIS Runtime. It was released last December of 2018, and now it's available on the iOS platform. But Android currently is in beta. So if you're interested in Collector on on an Android device, you can sign up for the beta, and it should be released sometime this spring. Collector will also come on Windows 10. If you're a classic user, you'll know that it worked on Windows 10. You just have to wait a little bit longer, but that will be available too. I'm not going to spend a lot of slides about the new functionality because I think that's easier to show you. But just some of the key themes that we're looking at is the new version supports a lot of the improvements that you have maybe used in either the web map viewer or in ArcGIS Pro. So things like mapping improvements, also using arcade expressions. The user experience when you see in the demo, I think it's much improved because the way you can collect your data, it's a lot easier to do things in Collector, and you can do things with a lot fewer taps. We have a couple more offline capabilities available, and there's also other things like you're able to collect 3D data and use a couple new tools. Now, I just want to point out to you, because there are a lot of you who have used the older version of the app, This has been rebranded as Collector Classic. It still is available in the App Store, and you can actually use it side by side on your device with the new version of Collector. So we've done this because we want to make sure your fieldwork is not too much disrupted by having to go to the new version. You'll probably find you can take your existing web maps and data and you can open it with a new collector and use it no problem, and I actually encourage you to do this. But just if you need a bit more time, we're giving that to you with making the Collector Classic still available. Just note though, any new improvements coming forward will be made on the new app, and they won't be generally supported on the old app, or it's not going to be also updated. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about your workflow, because Collector, it's a field app, but it's really important to kind of spend some time getting your data and your maps ready to go before you actually get out in the field. Designing your layers in your maps, you want to make sure that it's going to be easy for your field users to work with the app and also ensure that the best quality of data is collected. So when it comes to Collector, your editable data drives your map. Data collected is stored in a feature layer, which resides in your WebGIS, and maps using Collector are accessed through either ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. So either our on-premise hosted option, which is ArcGIS Enterprise, or the Esri hosted in the cloud, ArcGIS Organization, ArcGIS Online. In ArcGIS Online, your data needs to be in a hosted feature layer. If you're supporting data from ArcGIS Enterprise, you can host it in your portal for ArcGIS, which is just a component of ArcGIS Enterprise, hosted in your data store, or you can actually serve data coming from ArcGIS Server from an enterprise geodatabase, and you can serve that to your WebGIS and make that available to your Collector users. Now, if you have some specific requirements you're concerned about, for example, what version of Enterprise is supported and so on, I encourage you to actually go to the help. We'll give some resources at the end. You can look up the support for specific versions of information on, say, what versions of Enterprise are supported. Enterprise also supports using version data as well and non-version data. And either way, the feature layers are delivered to Collector with your web map, and you share these to your mobile users through a group in your ArcGIS organization so they can access it from the app. What's powerful about using Collector is your mobile workers are using your live database, and once they edit, as soon as they post that edit or sync that edit back to your WebGIS, the updates are instant. So we're pushing live data both out to the app to the field and back from the field again to the office. If you're wondering about offline options, just hang on. We will talk to those today as well, because we know a lot of you are interested. Let's just go to, oops, I think I skipped. Hold on. So what about creating your feature layers? You have a couple options available to you. You may be already managing your information one way or another. You may be working with an ArcGIS desktop. We're going to talk about Pro. This workflow is possible with ArcMap, although it is a little bit different, and it is easier and more connected with Pro. And this is where you may author and publish your web maps and also manage your data. If you create your data from ArcGIS Pro, you can publish a feature class, and you can take advantage of functions from your geodatabase, such as domains and subtypes. And these help you set some rules to control what kind of values can be used in the field. So when you publish these layers using domains and subtypes, Collector will create drop-down lists to give your users options to choose from. Subtypes can group your data values, and again, they can make submitting data easier. You can set a broad set of categories with subtypes and then more specific categories and domains, and I'll show you this in the demo. Again, limiting your choices and also making the data entry experience easier and getting better data quality. So if you use Pro, you publish your feature layers as well as your maps. You can also take those symbol effects and labeling and smart mapping styles, and when you publish these will be pushed forward to the map that will be used in Collector. There's another way to create your new feature layers as well as your web maps, and that's right in your ArcGIS Online organization. So this could be online or portal. We're going to show you online today. And what Mark is actually going to show you, a good way to get started is these feature layer templates that we've created. There are many different themes available, and they're just a really good starting point if you're not quite sure how to get some layers made for collecting data. You can publish these layers, and then you can change the fields and the layer settings to suit your needs. And you can also define an acceptable range of attribute values and ranges using domains, again, using that pick list technology. Again, collector, either way you create your layers or your maps, you can set up point, line, and polygon data collection options, and collector also supports related tables, whether you've created them from ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Online. So just a minute on feature layer properties. Again, you'll want to set certain properties once you've created those layers, because this is how you provide specific access and capabilities to different members of your organization for how they use and edit the data. You do this in your ArcGIS organization through the feature layer item detail page in the settings. There's a number of specific settings where you can restrict how the data is editing. You can turn on editor tracking, and there are different options that will suit your needs. And you'll also want to turn on the synchronization option if your mobile users need to take collector offline. So we're going to talk a minute about our web map properties. So for a web map to be able to be opened by a user with the collector app, it needs to have at least one editable feature layer. That's because collector is an app made for editing data. If you just want a layer where, an app where people go out and explore data in the field, we have the Explorer app, which looks very similar to collector, but it's not used for editing. It's just used like a digital map book in the field. So some of these properties, we need to also have a base map as well. And for your base maps, you can use one of the ones provided by ArcGIS Online. There's a bunch of them to choose from Esri or OpenStreetMap. The traditional format of our base maps use a raster tile format, but the last couple years we've introduced vector tile base maps that are supported in most of the ArcGIS apps, including the new collector. So these vector tile base maps you can now use. You couldn't use them with the classic app, and you can also use your own base map if you've published it and shared it with your ArcGIS organization. So Mark will show you in the demo some of those map settings you need to make sure you've checked on for using your web map and collector. And of course, it's very important that once you set up your layers and your web map, you share this with all of your users, the web map and all the associated layers, and groups are the way you do this in ArcGIS Online. So for example, if you have a field collection group, everyone in that group would then be able to use your map and your layers. And there's also a new setting in your web map settings, and it's checked on by default, and it says to use in collector. And what's useful about this button is if you have a bunch of web maps that are editable, but you don't want people to use them in collector, you can uncheck it, and then those web maps won't actually show up in your list from collector. So I know I found that useful. So just a few more things before I switch to Mark for the demo. We're going to look at those new capabilities. Of course, labels is something that everyone has wanted with collector, and we can finally have them, so it's very exciting. You can not only have labels, but you can also use arcade expressions. So you can do sophisticated things with labels, and you could even calculate entries for pop-ups and values using arcade with the new collector. So your pop-ups are also something you may want to spend some time on in your web map, because collector will use the pop-ups to display attributes, not only for viewing and finding out information, but for editing, like a paper form. And although as a GIS pro, you may think about features and fields as just attributes, your mobile team will look at assets and observations. So if you take your time to configure a good pop-up and take advantage of some of the new functionality supported now in collector, you can do things like making sure the title is descriptive, hiding some attributes, maybe putting up some attribute aliases. There's a bunch of different options you can do, and this will be very useful for your field editors. So there's a whole help topic on this called Prepare and Configure Your Form in Collector Online Help. And of course, your base map, you can now use the vector tile base maps as well. And for doing any kind of symbology, smart mapping styles will now be supported in the new collector app. So with that, I am going to switch over to Mark, because he's going to show you how to prepare your maps and your layers and get going with collector.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sue. So I'm going to bring up the version of ArcGIS Online. So I've already signed in with my user account. And as you can see here in my root folder, I don't have anything created at this moment, but I'm going to take advantage of these feature templates that Sue mentioned to be able to build something for Collector. Now, in our case, I'm not a big expert on wine. I don't know anything about wine. If it was about Diet Mountain Dew, I probably know a lot more. So let's take advantage of these different templates to be able to build a winery collector app. Now, from our templates, there so happens to be, under agriculture, a vineyard management feature layer template that we can use. So this is going to create a number of different layers within this feature layer. So things for blocks and subblocks. We've got some vineyard layers are also going to be created. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to zoom in towards our area of interest. So let's go into the beautiful Okanagan. I guess I shouldn't say it that way, but I just did. So let's head towards the Kelowna region. And then we need to give our new feature layer that we're going to create a name. And if I can spell, let's go with Wineries Demo. Let's try that. All right, so while that's spinning away, it's going to create this new feature layer, this hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Align for me. There are a number of different templates that are out there, and you could browse through them through the solutions website. So if you go to solutions.arcgis.com, click on the gallery. They are broken up by different industries, but there's also a way to be able to view the different templates that are specific to Collector. So one of the hot new topics is things like damage assessment. There's also a number of different types of inventories you can take advantage of, whether it's railroads or bridges or cycling. There's all sorts of different pre-made templates that you can leverage right out of the box using these curated templates that have been created by Esri. All right, so it looks like that brand new feature layer has been created. And as you can see, it creates a number of feature layers, or layers within that feature layer. So we've got blocks, subblocks, vineyard, and also a couple of related tables as well. Now, to be able to understand what these different layers are, you can always go into the Data tab and be able to see that, as you would expect, there are no rows in our tables because it is an empty feature layer at this point. But you can certainly see that a bunch of fields have been created. And to get a better view of that, you can go into the fields view to be able to get a listing of all the different fields that have been created as part of this template. Now, of course, you can always add new fields. If you have specific fields that you want to incorporate, you can certainly add those in. You can also remove fields as well, and also modify values in existing fields. So a good example of that here is the variety field. You can see that you can change some of the different settings. You can delete this field if you don't want it. Also, that's very interesting is it creates a list of values, or for us GIS nerds, a domain of set values that you can choose from a pick list, and that's really going to be advantageous in your Collector app. You can always edit that list and add or remove these different values in the domain, and as you can see here, it creates a whole bunch of different wine types. I don't know what any of these are. This is Sue's favorite, the Guggenheimer Minor. I don't know what that is, but whatevs. Now, let's take a look at the settings. So when you go into the settings tab, you'll notice that there is a bunch of properties for editing. And as Sue mentioned, you do have to have at least one of the feature layers editable. But you do want to make sure that these are the properties that you want for your editing. So what kind of edits are being allowed? What kind of features can the editors edit and see? All of these you should go through quite carefully to be able to get the correct settings that you want. In our case, I'm just going to add this one extra setting here to be able to track who has created and updated features. So do a quick save, and we have our properties for our feature layer, at least in terms of editing, ready to go. Now, of course, everything is built around a web map. So let's take this new layer that we created and add it into an empty web map. All right, so we are here in the Kelowna area. We see that our 5 different layers have been added into our web map. That's great. I'm just going to do a couple of additional things to the web map to make it look nice and pretty. First, let's incorporate a bookmark. So I'll just create a Kelowna bookmark in case we get lost. Right now, it's using the light gray canvas as our base map. That's fine, I guess, but let's kind of jazz it up a little bit by taking advantage of this new ArcGIS vector tile style editor. And this editor will allow you to be able to take some existing base map that you're familiar with and then make some tweaks to it. So right now we've got the light gray canvas. Let's just base our custom vector tile base map based on this. It's got a bunch of colors on it that are default, but again, let's kind of make it look nice and pretty for our particular region. So I'm going to drill down and find the color for land. Right now, it's kind of using a range of colors depending on zoom level. I'm just going to do this universal color, and I'm going to choose a hexadecimal value for color that I've done a little Googling. This is called white wine sauce. So I like sauce, and Sue likes wine, so I guess that kind of works out. So once you have that color set, let's save this particular base map. I'm just going to call this winery. Gosh, why do I keep saying wieners? Anyway, wineries demo base map. And we'll save that style onto my ArcGIS Online account. Great. So now that save is there, I'm going to add and search for layers. In this case, I'm going to go through my content. There it is, the wineries demo base map. But of course, I don't want to add it in as a layer on the map. I want to use this as my base map. So now we should be able to see that winey color. Nice and saucy, I like it. Now, in addition to that, I will also add in another layer that has been shared with me within a group. And this is going to have a bunch of points of existing wineries in the Okanagan Valley. So here we go, we've got Okanagan wineries. I will also add that in to my web map. Beautiful. Now, this layer, we can change some of the properties of these winery points. So, for example, maybe I want to add in some labels. And as we know, Collector now supports labels. You can see how the labels show up right now. Yeah, that's fine. Although a lot of it is kind of extra words. You know, do we need to have the word winery? We know there are wineries. So we could change that by taking advantage of this arcade expression language. So I'm going to create a new expression that's going to filter out these words. I've already pre-written this expression. And essentially, it's just using a bunch of replace statements that's going to search for those keywords and then just get rid of them. So let's copy that, and we'll paste this into our arcade expression, do a quick test to make sure it works, looks good, and we click OK. And now you can see Arcade on the fly is making those edits to those labels to make them appear exactly the way that I want. Just going to do a couple of other things here. The pop-up windows, just listing all of the fields that happen to be used. I grabbed this data from Business Analyst, and most of these fields are pretty useless to me. So in Configure Pop-up, I'm just going to undisplay pretty well all of the fields. But I do want to keep a couple of them open. So maybe city and maybe sales volume. Keep those. So now those pop-up windows will just have the attributes that I want to display. And those will appear in the new collector as well. Now, sales volume is interesting. I could take advantage of those volumes to be able to symbolize our points. So instead of having them all uniform, let's use the sales volume and symbolize those based on the actual volume itself. So the bigger the dot, the higher the volume of wine. Again, you can make some adjustments to this. This is just smart mapping, and again, ArcGIS Collector will now take advantage of smart mapping. So let's just symbolize these things, make them look nice and pretty, give it a nice wine color for Sue, kind of grapey. Here we go. That looks good. All right, so we made these different adjustments to make this look pretty. Let's save this as a web map. So wineries demo map, and we'll give this a tag. Of course, give it good tags. There we go. All right, so the web map is pretty well complete, and this is the web map that we're going to use in Collector, but I do need to make sure we have a couple more things in terms of settings. So let's go to the item page for this brand new web map, and let's do a quick check on the settings. As Sue will explain later on, you'll be able to take advantage of map areas and being able to enable this in offline mode, so she'll go into that in more details coming up. For the web map itself, you can incorporate some additional properties. So maybe for finding a location, I want to search by layer. So if somebody types in the name of the winery, we can use that in terms of finding locations. And there's that checkbox that Sue identified in her presentation about use in Collector for ArcGIS. By default, it's checked, but if you don't want to use this web map in Collector, just make sure you uncheck that web map property. All right, one final thing. Sue needs to be able to access this map. So we'll do a quick share. And you can share it, of course, to the public or within an organization, but we just so happen to have a group called Field Data Collection that we're both a member of, and we're going to use that group to be able to share our content. It should also prompt me to be able to have the same properties for the web map and the base map, so we're going to make sure that all of those have the same sharing properties, so everyone can have the same thing. So there you have it. That is the creation of the web map that's going to be used in the Collector demo coming up. And with that, I'm going to pass things back to Sue.
Thank you, Mark.
Awesome.
Okay, that's great. So what I'm going to do is just take a few questions here that have come in. And Mark, I think that base map looked like rosé.
Rosé, I'm sorry. Yes, okay.
Yes, it was not wine sauce, but rosé wine. But that's okay. So I've answered a couple questions. One of the questions was, would those feature templates work with classic Collector as well? And yes, they would. Just the smart mapping styles and the arcade expression and those things that Mark did in the map wouldn't, but the feature, the templates themselves would work in the old Collector. A question I got is about editor tracking, if it's available with the new Collector. This was an option with Collector Classic where you could publish a tracking layer and a template you could use, and this would track, you'd add this tracking layer to your data collection map and then enable tracking in your web map. So with ArcGIS, location tracking is going to be a new capability of your organization, and it's enabled in your organization and tied to the identity of members that you wish for tracking to be enabled, such as your field users and so on. And if you attended our fall UCs, we showed the Tracker mobile app. It's still in beta, but this is going to be available with ArcGIS Enterprise 10.7, which is later in March, and ArcGIS Online a bit later this spring. So that kind of location tracking capability is what you'll see in the new Collector, and we're hoping we'll have our hands on this and do some demos at the spring UC. So you will have location tracking in Collector and other mobile apps as well, such as Workforce, Survey 123. It's just right now, it's just in the final stages of beta. Just one more question, and then I'll just do a few more slides, and we'll try and answer more as we go on. Does Collector consume service credits? So the Collector app itself does not use credits. Certain functions from ArcGIS Online that are used with setting up your maps would, such as you use storage for hosting your feature layers. If you add photo attachments, that would have file storage credits. These credits used by storage are far less than, say, credits by geocoding or using an analysis service, though they're minor. There is some details in ArcGIS Online. If you go to credits, you can go in and have some details if you're worried about that, but really Collector, just using maps and layers, does not use a lot of credits. So we're going to go into a few more PowerPoint slides talking about offline data collection, because a lot of people do work in areas, in remote areas, forestry companies, mining companies. We recognize you don't always have a connection, but you still need to be able to go and use your maps in the field and collect data in the field. So Collector has always offered some options to download areas and then work in the field where you can still use all the other functions available, such as measuring your distances, accessing the feature data and the pop-ups, doing searches, collecting and updating features. But of course, then you have to do a synchronization between what you've updated in the field and in the office. So there's a couple different options too. You can copy your base map directly to your device. If you have a big base map, say you want to enable for a large area versus just every time a user downloads an offline area, they download their own little snippet of base map. You can actually do this in either a tile package or the new vector tile package, which you'd create in desktop using ArcGIS Pro for a vector tile package or either ArcMap for a tile package. Your users can sideload it, so just copy it using various ways directly to your device, then they have it available to them. So that's a good option if you have a big base map you want to work with. So with the new collector, there's two kinds of offline workflow. Again, on demand was available with Collector Classic. This is where the map office configures the map for offline use, as Mark had showed you, and the field worker defines their own area, sets their level of detail, and then downloads it. So this method is good because your field user, wherever they are, as long as they're connected when they do this initially, they can pick whatever area they want. But it does process data on the server for each download. There are a couple extra steps you may want to do before this. All your layers must be enabled for offline use, as well as your base maps must be configured to go offline. If you're just using an ArcGIS online map for a base map, those base maps are automatically configured for offline. But if you have your own, you have to just check it and make sure it's available. So the second way, which is new, is creating a pre-planned offline area. So this is done by the map author, and this may be useful if you have areas where you know your mobile workers frequently go offline, such as if you have defined service areas within a city. So you can predefine these, pre-package these, and then these are made available to your mobile workers. Again, they just have to download while they're connected. So the workflow to create this option is available in ArcGIS Online. This will not work with the Collector Classic option. So even if you have this set up for your web maps, you won't see these pre-planned offline areas with the Collector option for Classic option. But just remember, with the new Collector, you can use both of these as well. So you may want to still enable a map that will give the online, on-demand option, and you may also have your pre-planned areas. So how does this user experience work for on-demand? So again, the field worker, they go ahead, they list the maps. This is while they're connected. They select the web map. Then they select from the menu to add an offline area. They define the area, and they specify the level of detail. So just something to be aware of, the more detail you want and the bigger your area, the bigger that package will be when they download it. And what's good is that they can use bookmarks for the web map to define an offline area. So if you have a bunch of bookmarks for your web map, you can use them in Collector, and you can use them to define your offline area as well. So again, once they do this download and they have it on their device, they can open it with or without an internet connection. So let's look at the pre-planned user experience. So in this case, the map author, from the map settings, as Mark showed, there's this map areas, manage areas option. If they click on this, this will click through the manage areas workflow, and you define a spatial extent and again a level of detail, and you package this. Okay, and when you do this packaging, you can also set up to do regular updates, because one thing when you're working with offline maps, you need to remember there will be not only edits from the end user, like they'll be editing in their own offline areas and uploading these edits. You have to make sure you you push those edits through to your offline areas that you've pre-packaged, or they won't see what other people have done. So you can schedule this on a regular basis, and you can also do it ad hoc. So there's an option to update as well as schedule updates for this. So that can refresh your packages, and your users will see in Collector that they need to download something. So there's been a refresh done on it. So how does that pre-planned user experience work? They'll see for their maps, they'll see a little indicator saying offline areas available. And then they'll just have to go, and again, they'll see that download button, the little cloud with the arrow going down. That means they have to download that offline area. So, and you also see, and I'll show you this in the demo a lot more easily, you can see when syncs are done. So until they do a sync up from the downloaded data set, it's just on their device, and nobody else will see it, or they won't be able to see anybody else's either. So you'll see what I'm doing in my demo too is I will use Mark's map to work live and also show you the on-demand offline workflow. I will use another map to do the pre-planned user experience, because once you enable these pre-planned offline areas, your user has to kind of use those. So what I'm saying is that you might want to have a web map that you have ready to go. You might just want to make a copy of that web map and then use the copy for offline for creating those pre-planned areas. So just something to keep in mind. If you want to do pre-planned offline and also at the same time enable a live map and on-demand offline, you'll just need 2 maps. And again, you can make them be the same. So just a second to talk about data synchronization. It is bidirectional, so you're not only editing and sending those back to the server, but the server changes are being pulled down to the device. So there are settings for this, and there are settings for the web map that you can set, and also on the device as well. So this is just, again, something we'll go through in the demo so that you know how to make sure that you're providing the latest versions of the data set to your end users. So again, the options in the device are that you can have auto sync, which you enable in the settings, and you can set a regular refresh interval. So the auto sync will happen when your user is connected and they won't have to really worry about it. Or you can have them that they can at any time hit the sync button in the map. If they're connected, they can sync up their changes. And there is a panel that gives you information on pending edits. And you can also set up alerts and notifications if for whatever reason the sync doesn't happen, so your users know about that. So the default is they're syncing every 15 seconds. You can sync every 30 minutes to every hour. And you can also set an option that your users can only sync when they have a Wi-Fi connection. This is enabled by default. So again, there's some options to kind of help your users work with those offline capabilities. So now we're going to switch to the demo, and I'm going to kind of do 2 demos in one. I'm going to show you the pre-planned offline data collection setup, and then we're going to go and use Collector. Pretend we're in lovely Kelowna, although I'm in the middle of winter and here in Toronto, and we're going to go and collect some vineyard data. So I'm just going to share my screen now. And we're just going to go into looking first at a map I've created. This started with a similar data set that Mark actually had using that vineyards management data template, but I've created a separate map which is for working with offline areas. So if you remember, Mark went into the settings and he had set to enable the offline area, which I also have. In this map areas, you can see that I actually have 3 map areas available. And if I click to manage my map areas, this manage workflow comes up, and it's going to bring up my map, and it's going to show me that I have 3 offline areas here. I've created one for 3 separate wineries. And if I go in and click on any of these ones, just zoom in a bit to show you where it looks like on the map as well, you can see that all the feature layers, all the related tables, as well as my base map, which is just an Esri World Imagery base map, are packaged, and you can see the size is 15.5 megabytes. You can also see that I have an update set up weekly. This is something I know when I worked in local government, we would update things weekly to push out to field workers for when they're not connected. But you can go and edit this, and you could go in and set, you have a sketch tool to redefine your area. And you also can set your level of detail. Again, your level of detail determines the quality and the resolution of downloaded layers. You have to kind of balance giving them enough detail with the size of the download as well. And then you can schedule your update here. So you could at any time hit this refresh button here and refresh that sync. So I'm not going to create an offline map area just because it does take a little bit of time. And we're short on time because we have lots to show you. So we're actually going to go in and switch right to working in the field with Collector. So you can see we have a beautiful sunny Kelowna picture here. And you can see that I have the Collector Classic app on my device, but I also have the new Collector. So again, you can work with them both at the same time. It's not a problem. So I'm logged into my ArcGIS organization. Again, I'm using ArcGIS Online, but this would work with ArcGIS Enterprise as well. There's a couple settings that I just wanted to show you. By default, you can set the accuracy for your data collection, so the required accuracy and whether you want to collect in centimeters or meters, and you can also set your required confidence levels. So if you set these, your GPS will have to honor these settings before you can collect. You can set up GPS averaging if that's something that your organization requires, again, that you use, collect a number of points for a single location and then average the information to get the final location. You could set that up here. You could also set up streaming. So streaming is nice to smoothly capture curves as you travel over boundaries around features, and you can set this up by time or distance interval. You can also set up things like your photo size. So again, if you're concerned about storage, the default is large. You could set it to the actual size as taken by the device or limit it for smaller attachments that may sync faster. Again, those are just some things you can set up. We don't really have time to, or I can't really show you an external GPS device, but Collector does support high accuracy GNSS devices. You connect by Bluetooth, and then you set up your provider. So I don't have anything to show you here just because I'm only using the GPS on my iPad, but you could certainly connect to that, and there's a lot of documentation online about pulling in that GNSS metadata and adding it into your actual attributes for your features. So if that's important to you, you can totally do that. Just look at the topic, high accuracy data collection online. Some general things that you can do. Again, you can set your units. By default, Collector displays coordinates in the same format as your base map, so whatever that spatial reference is, and you can change that here if you'd want to see them differently. Directions. So Collector integrates with different direction providing apps on your device. So whatever apps you have, I have not only Google, Apple, Navigator, I also have Waze. You can set it up that it will prompt you to choose the one you want, or say we'll always go to Navigator or Waze. So you can, again, set this up for your device. And what I was mentioning before for offline, the auto sync button here, that might be something you want to put so you don't have to worry about your mobile workers remembering to sync. Auto sync will happen when you have a connection, and you will get messages in Collector about when this happens, and here's the settings you can have. Okay, so that's about it for the settings. Let's just go right into the demo. So Collector lists all, again, the web maps that are shared with me, and it also displays them in groups, which is kind of nice. So here we have the field data collection. And there's Mark's rosé map, which is what I'm going to call it, his wineries demo map, which he created today. So again, I am working on a live map. You can see a GPS accuracy, but I can't really use GPS inside the building. But you can see some things like we have the bookmark he created for Kelowna. And you can see things like his smart mapping style, his vector base map with the custom colors. You can see the labels rotate. It's pretty nice. So you start off with a nicer looking map right off the bat, which is one of the enhancements for Collector. Now, what we can also do is use that search capability. So Mark enabled search on the winery layer. So you'll see the winery coming up in the geocoder as well, but the one on the top here, which is Summerhill Winery, one of my favorite wineries, says I'm a kilometer away from my simulated location, and now I can see how Mark has hidden those things in that pop-up because maybe I don't need that information. So Collector gives you, in this new interface, a bunch of tools right at your fingertips that are kind of easy to access. So the compass is kind of neat because it just gives you the straight line distance. Whoa, that was a little bit of turning around there. But if you were out in the field and you weren't on a road or anything like that, you could get a straight line bearing and distance, and this would help you to navigate. If I would want to go and get directions, again, I didn't set that it has to go to one app or another. It could go out to any of these ones. It's up to me to choose. So another thing with Collector that I want to point out is how easy it is to go and edit a feature. So Summerhill, the wineries layer is one of my editable layers. I could hit the edit button right here, but I'm not going to do that one. I'm just going to cancel. What I'm going to do actually is go out and change my base map. So although this base map is really nice, I'm not really in the field and I can't see anything. I'm going to change to an imagery base map because then I can at least pretend that I can see some blocks for the winery. So I've switched to that, and you can see in my lower right corner here the collect button. That's available to me at any time. So I can just hit that button and all the editable layers have come up for me. So I'm going to pick to add a subblock, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here. Move around. I'm just going to delete this last point here. Okay, and I'm just going to pretend that here I am in the field, and I'm going to go in and start digitizing in a polygon. So I'm just going to add some points. And you can see this crosshairs. This is kind of our cursor on target experience. You can't see where my finger is on the screen, but my finger's not in the way of me adding these points. So if you happen to be collecting somewhere and you have to digitize something in the field, your finger won't get in the way, as sometimes it did with the previous app. Okay, so I've added a bunch of points. And another thing I want to show you is how when you're editing, if I just switch here from portrait to landscape mode, you can see you have a slider here, and you can slide up and down the panel. So if I'm adding attributes, I can see more of the panel for the attributes, and if I'm working on the map, I can see more of the map. So again, those pick lists from the domains are there. Here are the vineyards. What I'm going to do is pick a variety, and since this is a rosé kind of looking map, I'm going to pick a red wine that you could use to make rosé. I'll pick Malbec. Oops, do that again. There you go. Oh, sorry, that keeps popping up. And also another thing that's nice in Collector is how easily you're able to take a photo or attach something. So if I want to attach something, I could attach a video or recorded audio or something from my photo library. I'm just going to go and pick something from my demos folder here. I do have some winery pictures. There you go. That attachment is there. And now I could update that. If you notice, there were a couple of different options for when I was actually editing the polygons, such as streaming and so on, but I'm just going to go and submit this edit. And it's going to, as again, I'm working live, that's going to be submitted, and there you go. Another thing we've had a couple questions come in is about related records. So you can see that wineries blocks, that related table is there. I could go in and add new records for this anytime, and I could work with that as well. So that's just a quick look at working with Collector connected. Let's take a look at how it actually works when you're not connected. So again, you can see on my screen, I have all these different maps here. I'm actually going to go into a folder where I put that offline area map. So the one I'm bringing your attention to here is the Okanagan Vineyards map, offline areas. So for this map, again, as I mentioned, once you enable those offline areas, you kind of need to work with those areas offline. So you can see that the top one, the Mission Hill, there's those 3 dots. That one I've already downloaded and is on my device here. I've clipped out a very small area. You can see that not only the base map, but the feature layers are brought in. So some of these kind of overlapped on the edge of my block, but they were still brought in. But what if I wanted to download a new one? I'm going to download this Quailsgate one. I would just have to click the download button and then it would download. It's going to take a minute, so I'm not going to do that right now. But I'm going to go into this Gray Monk one, and I'm going to go in and show you. It works just the same way. So what I want to point out here is this is a data set that I've modified in ArcGIS Pro. So not only do I have those domains, but I've added subtypes. So first I split up the varieties of wine by red and white. So let's say I want to add white wine this time. And just really quickly add some points, add the block. What I've done now is I've only associated those varietals that are white wines, and it's pronounced Gewürztraminer, Mark, so that's how you pronounce my favorite wine. So now I'm able to go in and again take advantage of not only domains but subtypes. So I could do attachments, I could do all the same things. So if I click submit, let's say that I'm connected now, you can see a few things here that I can see that those little sync buttons, it shows me the time to auto sync, and it says, here's my edit that I need to sync. So if I click sync, let's say I'm connected now, I did my vineyards walk and I'm able to connect. Now I can go up and sync that, and it will sync that. So once I go back, you can see now where the maps are. You can see for that top offline area for the Gray Monk Winery, you can see my message that it's synced right now. So that's a good way to kind of manage those offline areas. Again, if I go back to Mark's winery demo map, if I wanted to, I can make those offline areas ad hoc. So now we're going to go back to so I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'm going to bring back the slides. We're going to just do a couple wrap-up slides, and I'm going to try and answer some questions afterwards. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about licensing for Collector, just because you might want to know. So Collector is available as part of your ArcGIS organization. So the app itself, there's no extra cost for using, whether you're with ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, but it is tied to your user licensing. Because if you remember, Collector is an app for editing your data. So you do need to have an editor type of user. So it's a little bit different with ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise, just because last year we introduced some new user levels. So you might be familiar with the level 1, the viewer license, and the level 2 editor license. There's more options now with ArcGIS Online, and there's what's called a new field worker type of user, which can edit in the field apps itself. So this might be good for you if you have users that only use the field apps, so Collector and Survey 123 and Workforce. You can license them for your ArcGIS Online organization with this field worker license, and they will be able to use these apps in the field apps bundle, and it gives you a lower cost. With ArcGIS Enterprise, you do need an editor type of user. So just something to keep in mind. I've just put a link on the bottom right corner here. Jeff Shaner, who's the product manager for Collector, posted a really good blog post explaining how these new user types in ArcGIS Online are tied in with these different apps and these different app bundles. So again, you'll have the recording available to you, and you'll be able to have a look and go from there. So just before I wrap up, I just wanted to mention a couple things. Collector does integrate really well with other apps. One of our apps that you might have seen at our user conferences or in webinars is the Workforce for ArcGIS app. And it's basically used to assign work, and a mobile app that our mobile users use to pick up work. And then once you pick up your assignment, you can be pushed through to your data collection app, whether it's Survey 123, whether it's Collector. So the new Collector works great with this. So that might be an option for you if you want to keep track of your mobile workforce. There's another method you can integrate Collector with other apps, and it's called the custom URL scheme. And basically this allows you to launch a native app from another app or a website or an email, and you can set options in this URL that pass to the app you want to open and perform specific functions, as in Collector, open a specific web map, center the map on a location, or even start data collection. So if you're interested in this custom URL scheme, I don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but if you go on our GitHub site and look for Esri Collector integration, it will give you the details on what you can do. And you can actually pass attributes, and you can use the URL scheme to, what I've seen is if you're using Collector to collect some features, but you still want to use a survey to collect other information. For example, you might want to update a hydrant in Collector, but then push the form to collect hydrant inspection to Survey 123, the custom URL scheme. There's one for Survey 123 as well for all our field apps. You can do that. So that's a good way to integrate Collector with your other apps. So just to sum up, we've kind of shown you what Collector does. We haven't had time to show you everything today. We could really talk about it all day. But Collector does support all the functionality provided by the Collector Classic. The only thing is the location tracking, which is coming this year, so this spring. It works on and offline. Again, it supports external devices like GNSS devices, so high accuracy GPS. You can also connect barcode or QR code scanners, or even Spike, the laser measurement device, can connect to Collector, and you can use that to collect some of the information and fill out your attributes. And a Collector integrates really well with your field to office workflow. We hope we've shown you some of the key capabilities, such as you can take advantage of a lot of the mapping improvements that have been available in ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Pro, and you haven't been able to use with Collector. They are there now. The forms have had some improvements, so you can see how you can edit a little bit better. And the user experience, I think, is overall, it's easier to use, and it's more similar to using something like Navigator and Explorer, so your mobile users will be more familiar with that. But there is a lot more coming to Collector, and there may be some things that you guys are looking for that aren't there yet. So I know a lot of people are asking questions about smarter forms. So Collector is not the same as Survey 123. Survey 123 uses XLS format, and you can make a really sophisticated data entry form, and it's designed to replace complex paper forms. But Collector going forward will use Arcade to do things like setting conditional visibility, grouping your attributes for entry, So these kind of things are coming with Collector. I can't show you that today because it's not available even in the beta yet, but we've seen demos of it. So there will be some form improvements, but it's not quite going to be the same as Survey 123. So they're different products for different needs. There's other improvements coming, such as snapping to features during editing and bulk attribute updates. So if these come out, we'll show them to you as soon as we can. Hopefully some of them will be available at our spring user conferences. So before we break for questions, there are a lot of good resources for Collector. Honestly, everything you need to know about using Collector is documented in the online help. Some other resources that I find really useful are the Collector blog. It's written by their development team, so there's a lot of good information, and this is where you can learn about what's new and what's coming as well. And you may also be familiar with GeoNet. It's our Esri-hosted community. A lot of US customers and a lot of us as staff here post questions and help each other solve problems. It's a really good resource. A lot of times if you Google a Collector problem, you'll actually be taken to GeoNet and you may find the answer, and if you don't, you can post it and somebody will try and answer it for you, even if the answer is it's not available, but it's being considered. And you can even post your ideas for improvements for Collector. The product team will look at it and they will try to see what they can do to move that along. A couple of other things that are coming up. I'm sure we're going to do some more mobile webinars. We don't have any scheduled at this time, but there is one on the new improvements to ArcGIS Pro at 2.3. There are some training courses. So we do have a field data collection and management using ArcGIS course here at Esri Canada, and it's a 2-day course, and it takes you through in detail using all of these maps. There are some other courses that might help you with working with your desktop or online GIS. And I also want to point out that as a customer, you can get a lot of free e-learning on our Esri training site. There is a field mobility topic that if you search on the catalog will take you to lots of resources that will help you to work with Collector. So I want to just thank everyone for coming today and attending our webinar. We have a ton of questions, and I don't think Mark and I will be able to answer them, but what we'll do is we'll try and go through some of them. If you want to stay on, we are going to pause the recording. But